that there's much warmer than normal water over northern Australia and Indonesia. And what that means is the rainfall follows that water. There's more evaporation, and so there's increased moisture in the air. And as the westerly flow of weather and of climate moves across the Australian continent, that moisture is then dropped, and we see there's more rainfall across the western, centre, and southeastern Australia. Okay? So negative phase means we have an increased chance in rain, and a positive phase means we have less chance of rain. So again, there are some links to some great videos which explain this with moving graphics, and it's a bit easier to follow. So if you still are not quite getting that, then please go and watch those. Wherever the warm water is, there's more chance of rain. And if that's near Australia, then what we see is more rain in Australia. So, with that being said, let's have a look at the where the warm water has been found in the Indian Ocean over the last 25, 30 years. So, whenever there's a negative IOD, so whenever there's a negative, it's in the blue down the bottom, whenever it's negative, that means that the warm water is near Australia and we can expect increased rainfall. Whenever there is a positive event, as you can see the ones that have been marked out here, we can expect less chance of rainfall, and we can expect much drier climate. So if you have a look at the last 3 years in Australia, ending with 2019, you can quite clearly see a trend of positive IOD events. Okay, you can see the last 3 years have all been positive, with 2019 being an exceptionally strong positive IOD event. So what that means is there is a very warm temperature waters over near Africa, and very cold waters near the northern area of Australia. And what that leads to is a much reduced chance of rainfall in Australia, as we observed last year. A very, very low rainfall totals, the lowest on records in many parts of Australia, because of this positive IOD event. And here's an image of that. So you can see the very cold water off the coast of Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore, that area there, in the blue arrow, and in the red you can see the very high temperature water off the coast of Africa. And what that's done is it's led to this extreme weather and this extreme climatic year that we had in 2019. Okay, so if you look at the news for Eastern Africa last year, you can see that there was an enormous amount of rainfall, an enormous amount, and what that led to was these plagues that destroyed the crops of a lot of the farmers in that region in Congo and in the region there in Eastern Africa. And obviously in Australia, we know the effect that we had in 2019. So we could see the sea temperatures, and scientists and meteorologists would make predictions based on these sea temperatures, and they did come to fruition. So there was less rainfall, much drier conditions and hotter conditions in Australia, and wetter conditions with much more rainfall in Eastern Africa. So this is the IOD index. So this is looking at whether there is a positive or negative IOD, and you can see that there was that massive spike towards the end of winter and into the new year in 2020. So you can see that it spiked up to 2 degrees, which is a huge differential. And then if you look, though, it's dropped dramatically since then, and it's now sitting in the neutral or slightly negative territory. And that has resulted in us having quite a lot of rain in recent times. Since the bushfires, we've actually had an abnormal amount of rain. It's been much above average, and in Melbourne, it's actually been the wettest start to the year on record. So again, not solely only based on this IOD climate pattern, but this is an influencer of what's happening in Australia and Australia's climate. So again, you can see this is the result. I showed these maps already, but this is the result of that positive IOD, that severe warm water over by Africa, cold water northern Australia, and that results in lowest on record rainfall across much of Australia and almost the highest on record temperatures across much of Australia as well. Now, that the IOD index dropped dramatically and is now near negative territory. And what that has resulted in from the 1st of January to the 9th of May, as you can see in this next graph, is above average rainfall for much of Australia, which is quite an amazing reaction to happen so quickly, go from one to the other. Okay? So what I'm asking you to do now is go and watch those videos, get a really solid understanding of the Indian Ocean dipole. Make sure you really understand how it influences Australia's climate. And then I want you to create a guide to explain to your family or to explain to someone who doesn't know why 2019 was dry and why 2020, the start, has been wet. Okay? So you must explain the Indian Ocean dipole in this guide, and there must be visuals. So you must include pictures in this guide. I want you to do this by hand. Okay? I want you to form strong neural pathways. I don't want you to find pictures and copy and paste from the internet. That doesn't get you thinking. That doesn't get your hand moving and your mind thinking and you building those neural connections. So I want you to do this by hand. I want you to draw. I'm sorry, I do like forcing you to draw and create things. But that's what I want you to do. I want you to create a guide to explain to your family what is the Indian Ocean dipole and how it influences our climate in relation to the past 2 years.